Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. This is my first time serving as a ranking member of a subcommittee during a hearing, and I am grateful to be here today. I look forward to working with you and the rest of this committee on behalf of the American people. Before I was elected to Congress or to the Texas House of Representatives, I was a public defender and civil rights attorney by trade. I know about the Department of Justice and what they're supposed to be doing. I am also very concerned by a rogue DOJ, or one that is not beholden to the American people. I am very concerned about the DOJ being weaponized by the White House. I am concerned about the FBI being used for purposes outside of our domestic security and maintaining peace at home. So, weaponization of the Department of Justice. This phrase, the weaponization of government, is something that has been overly used and repeated by my Republican colleagues. They use it as a war cry, a battle call, to justify dismantling federal agencies and the purging of thousands of hardworking, dedicated federal servants who swore an oath to protect the Constitution and the rule of law. If the purpose of this hearing today is to examine and expose the weaponization of government, specifically the weaponization of Department of Justice, then it is essential that we understand what exactly weaponization means. Fortunately, history is kind to us. Last Congress, the House Judiciary Committee held numerous hearings on this notion of weaponization. And in those hearings, Republicans described weaponization as, quote, corruption, quote, government abuse and political treachery, having the government act, quote, against people who were innocent and did nothing wrong, quote, targeting people of one political persuasion. And as one of my colleagues aptly described, quote, if you speak up about the abuses you are seeing, excuse me, or are sharing information that may not fall in line with the political narrative, you will be suspended without pay, have your security clearance revoked, or your life will be turned upside down. It's pretty clear that the MO is, if you don't comply, they will retaliate. If you don't agree with their political agenda, you get suspended. They do it in such a way to deter others from speaking up and speaking out. These are not my words. These are not the words of Ranking Member Raskin or Leader Jeffries. These are the words of congressional Republicans. This is what they believe embodies weaponization. I am the first to admit that I don't often agree with many things that my Republican colleagues say, but wholeheartedly concur with their descriptions here. What concerns me, however, is the inability of my colleagues on the other side to connect the dots that are in front of them, while the rest of America is watching as this DOJ weaponization takes hold right before our eyes. And to be clear, what we are witnessing happening before us satisfies the descriptions used by my Republican colleagues. Corruption. Any lawyer with a good head on their shoulders will tell you that the recent attempt by Trump's DOJ to drop the corruption case against Mayor Adams is ironically riddled with corruption itself. This decision to try and drop this case was never about some flawed argument or approach by the DOJ. In fact, even acting Deputy Attorney General Emile Beauvais, in his February 10th letter to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, the office handling the case stated that the Department of Justice's attempt to drop this was done, quote, without assessing the strength of the evidence or legal theories on which the case is based inherited. Instead, it is trying to drop the case because Trump's DOJ is, quote, particularly concerned about the impact of the prosecution on Mayor Adams' ability to support critical ongoing federal efforts to protect the American people from the disastrous effects of unlawful mass immigration and resettlement. Put differently, the Department of Justice wants Mayor Adams to give fealty to Trump and also use him to execute Trump's immigration policy in New York City. The blatant corruption of this quid pro quo alone should warrant this subcommittee to investigate the current weaponization of this Department of Justice. But this is far from the only example of weaponization occurring before us. Next, government abuse and political treachery. Make no mistake, acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove ordering Brian Driscoll, the then acting director of the FBI, to turn over a list of not just current but also former FBI staff who were assigned, quote, at any time to investigations and or prosecutions related to the events that occurred at or near the U.S. Capitol on January 6, end quote. It is a clear illustration of government abuse targeting employees they wrongfully claim are political adversaries. In fact, rather than utilize the FBI's time and resources to protect America from cyber attacks, terrorism, and other violent crimes, Trump's DOJ is choosing to spend resources to build loyalty to Trump. If that is not government abuse, I just don't know what is. Third, the view that the government is acting, quote, against people who were innocent and did nothing wrong. For those of you who may not be familiar, when career prosecutors and staff at DOJ are assigned to cases, they take these tasks on not because of power or politics, but because it is quite simply part of the job. It's rare that prosecutors get every case they want. Instead, prosecutors and staff are assigned cases because of their capacity, experience, and expertise. But where we see commitment to the Constitution and the rule of law, the Trump DOJ sees reason for retribution. This has already taken shape in various forms, but notably, on January 27th, Trump's then acting Attorney General James McHenry fired DOJ officials, on those of who which worked on federal criminal investigations into Trump. Let me repeat this. They fired DOJ officials who did nothing wrong. These officials simply did their jobs. Now finally, quote, targeting people of one political persuasion. While I just briefly touch on this point, I want to be very clear with the American people. Within the last 35 days, Trump's DOJ has already sent inquiry letters to Democratic members of Congress for speaking out and criticizing Elon Musk. Our task on this subcommittee today is to conduct real congressional oversight of the Department of Justice, because this notion of weaponization is not simply a threat, it is a reality. The public is worried. Career attorneys are worried. Congress is worried. The world is worried. Every day that passes, the Department of Justice is losing institutional knowledge and exceptional attorneys because of a blind arrogance and vengeance. We owe it to this country to come together to call out weaponization happening today, to call out corruption, government abuse, attacks on innocent people, and the targeting of people with different political views. We owe it to everyone to speak the truth, even if the truth is hard to hear. We owe it to us all to preserve our country's rule of law. And the final point that I'll make is that there were a number of attorneys that were brought up in the chairman's opening remarks. Attorney General Letitia James of New York, as well as DA Fani Willis. I do want to point out that each of these women are women that were duly elected in their states, and Fani Willis was just reelected. That is not federal lawfare. That is not weaponization of the federal government. Both of those women work on the state level. And the final point that I'll make is that while they work on state levels, there were only a certain amount of cases that were able to be tried prior to the election. Any cases that did take place, whether they were civil cases or federal cases, I do want to point out, regardless of who brought those cases ultimately, at least the ones that did go, they ultimately went to juries. They went to juries that were full of American citizens, juries that were not asked, are you going to sit here and support Donald Trump and his agenda, or do you have some left-wing agenda? They were given an opportunity to hear the evidence, and they were able to rule based on the evidence that was presented to them. I am someone who misses the courtroom every single day, as I practiced for 17 years before entering into Congress. And if we continue to pretend as if the voices of everyday American citizens don't matter when they have an opportunity to listen to both sides of a case and make a decision, then we really are in for a rude awakening in this country. One thing that we should do as members of Congress is we should preserve our institutions and make sure we build them up to the point that people have trust. And when you walk into a courtroom, you have no idea who's walking in and who just decided that they would actually show up for jury duty. And I am here to tell you that I still believe in that imperfect but beautiful system that we have in this country, known as the jury system. And with that, I will yield.